Good morning, everyone. It is Sunday at 9:30, and welcome to Messages from Jesus. I'm Pastor Ed Anderson, and we have for the last several weeks been studying about biblical concepts of health and the environment. We've been looking at things like nutrition and exercise, the environment, air. Today, we're going to be looking at the concept of water, the liquid of life. So, as we take a look at this, one of the first things that we recognize real quickly is that we obviously need water. And Russia, as you know, several weeks ago had that oil spill, and it's a big deal when we think about pollution like that in our water because we see how important it is for us to have clean water and clean access. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and we're going to take a look at it from the perspective of the Bible. So as we take a look at it, let's just have a quick little prayer. Father in heaven, we just pray now for your Holy Spirit that as we take a look at this concept of water, that we can see the biblical concepts of the true water and spring of life, and that is you. Father, we pray for your Holy Spirit now in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so let me start off by sharing with you one of the most famous poems in the English language. And it was written in 1797 by Samuel Taylor Coleridge, and it is called The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. And in that it tells of an ill-fated sea voyage. At one point the ship, which was powered only by the wind, was sitting there dead in a breezeless sea. And a section of the poem reads, "Day after day, day after day, we stuck, nor breath nor motion, as idle as a painted ship upon a painted ocean. Water, water everywhere, and all the boards did shrink. Water, water everywhere, nor any drop to drink." Okay, so just think about that. Water, water everywhere, nor any drop to drink. That would, I imagine, be so terribly disheartening and alarming to be surrounded by an ocean full of water, and yet you can't drink a single drop of it. Okay, surrounded by this vast ocean of water, clear, fresh, blue water, so rich and teeming with incredible and wonderful life, and yet for a human to drink this salt water would be like drinking poison. Ocean water is wonderful to sail on, awesome to surf on. As you know, this is what I did when I was growing up. Fishing is awesome in the ocean. It makes great, amazing, picture-perfect paintings, and poetry is written about it. But just imagine drinking this salt water, and it would be deadly to us. So, as you know, our planet is mostly water. 71% of the earth is ocean water. And as kids growing up, we learned that if you look at a satellite photo, predominantly the earth from space looks like this blue marble. And it's predominantly blue because of the what? The water. But this isn't fresh, clean, potable water. This is all mostly salt water. And while this water is filled with amazing fish and whales and coral and all these beautiful, endless variety of creatures that thrive in it, for you and me as humans, to drink that water would be certain death. In fact, of all the water on the earth, only about 0.37%, okay, that's a third, okay, 0.37, that's less than 1%, only about 0.37% is drinkable. Okay, so in its natural state, water is drinkable. Water really is this precious commodity, especially when you realize that it is so essential to all life on Earth, including us as humans. And really, if you think about it, our planet wouldn't be our planet, and life as we know it wouldn't be here without water. Water is about as basic to our existence as is air, but only 0.37% of that is fresh water without salt. You know, the Bible talks a great deal about water in many different contexts. The Bible's first depiction of what the primeval earth was like at the beginning of creation week reads like this. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form, and it was void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And that's found in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 and 2. So we can safely say, okay, based on these texts, that with phrases like the face of the deep and the face of the waters, that water was certainly here at the beginning. By the second day of creation, there was a dividing of the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. We read that in Genesis chapter 1, verse 7. And on day 3, what happens but that the waters under the heaven were gathered together into one place, so that the dry land would appear. Genesis chapter 1, verse 9. So water everywhere. Thus, water was clearly part of the earliest stages of our planet's existence. And in Genesis chapter 2, we also see water, but now in a different form. Here it reads, "But there went up a mist from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground." And we see that in verse 6. And I'm reading from the King James Version with the emphasis supplied. So here we see a mist, or a water in the form of vapor, was the form of water that nourished this new planet. Then in the same chapter, a few verses later, the Bible tells us about a river that watered Eden, the garden, and that then divided into 4 other river tributaries, and each of those were given its own name. Okay, then of course, when the wickedness of humanity was so great because of the fault of sin that God decided to destroy and start over, he did what? With water. What did he do with it? Okay, look in Genesis chapter 7, verse 19, it reads, "And the waters prevailed exceedingly upon the earth, and all the high hills that were under the whole heaven were covered." So water, which is so crucial to life, can also be a form of death and destruction. So now let's jump ahead many years to the Exodus from Egypt. What was the crucial defining moment? The moment when a new nation was born, a kingdom of priests, okay? What was it that occurred? Well, we read here, and Moses stretched out his hand over the, what does it say? Sea, okay, water again. "And the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. And the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea upon the dry ground, and the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on their left." We read that in Exodus chapter 14, verses 21 through 22. Now, scholars have long noted the parallel with this story to the original creation story, or the creation event. The Hebrew word for the spirit, okay, quote unquote spirit, of God that hovered over the waters in Genesis chapter 1, as we read, is the same word for wind, okay? So the Hebrew word for spirit is the same word for wind that God used to divide the waters during creation, and again, as we see it in the Red Sea. And of course, in that dividing of the waters, dry land appeared in both events. In the creation of the world, and later in the exodus of Israel for deliverance from Egypt, we see that it was the spirit, or the wind of God, that divided it. So we see water linked to God as the creator, the one who spoke our world into existence. We also see water here in Exodus linked to God as the Redeemer, okay, the one who saved and redeemed the Hebrew nation from Egyptian bondage and slavery, okay? So this was a symbol of the redemption that we have in Jesus Christ. As we look forward to in faith to Jesus Christ, we are reminded of his life and his death as the foundation and source of our own redemption. So let's go ahead and let's jump ahead now to that New Testament, where we also see the prevalent role of water, one of the most powerful images being that of baptism by immersion. It's really the symbolic of the death to our old self and of a new life that's raised in Christ. So Paul so clearly says, "Or do you not know that as many of us as were baptized into Christ Jesus were baptized into his death? Therefore, We were buried with him through baptism into death, that just as Christ was raised from the dead by the glory of the Father, notice this, even so we also should walk in the newness of life. Romans chapter 6, verse 3 through 4. So notice here that the newness of life is equated to the ceremonial activity of water baptism. And it's at this point when we symbolically take on this new life in Jesus Christ. Here we see water associated with redemption. We see water associated with life. So, though now in a deeply spiritual sense, we look at water and its symbolism, it's not that surprising, is it, that water is essential not only to life at the most basic level, but it's also used symbolically as a way of portraying cleansing and the spiritual life that we experience inside us. Now, we cannot exist as spiritual beings without first existing as physical ones, right? And physical life, at least as we know it here on earth, cannot exist without water. Without water, our heart, our liver, our kidneys, everything would stop functioning and we would die. We have trillions of cells in the human body, and every last single one of them needs water to survive. And next to air, water is the most vital element needed for survival. Did you know that by weight, a newborn infant is approximately 75% water, and an adult is about 70% water? A man weighing about 198 pounds has about 138 pounds of water in his body. Isn't that amazing? In fact, even the gray matter of your brain is approximately 85% water. So if you get a lot of headaches and you experience those kinds of sufferings, like, things that are surging in your head, you might want to drink some water because your brain is 85% water and you might be going through dehydration. Blood is 83% water. So we need blood to cleanse all of the toxins out of our body. It's through that water, that 83% of water, that flushes our systems out. Muscles, by the way, are 75% water, and even hard marrow bone is 20 to 25% water. So water is pervasive in our entire body. The very cells and tissues of the human body not only contain water, but it requires water to perform their function. In other words, it's not enough for them to have water to exist. It needs water to perform. Water, the liquid of life, performs so many functions in our body that we are utterly essential, that water is utterly essential for our existence and well-being. And water forms the transport system within the body. What do I mean by that? Well, what that means is several things. First of all, water is a lubricant for movement. Our joints don't use oil like cars do, right? It's water. Water is the prime transporter of that lubrication, but it's also the main transport of waste. Okay, like I mentioned, all those toxins are filtered through the kidneys, and water helps keep the body cleansed of all those toxins. But did you also know the third thing is that water helps our body regulate its temperature? So a lot of people don't realize that the metabolism in your body, the burning of fuel, requires water. And when your body is going through an infection, you need water because you're overheating. That's where your temperature comes up when you're sick. That's why you need lots of fluid. So water helps keep our body temperature right at the right level to regulate. So water is very essential. Fluids are very essential for our survival, even when we're sick. And as I talked before, blood is made up predominantly of water because that is the life force that sends nutrients to all of the organs in our body, but also cleanses the toxins from the cells. Here in Leviticus chapter 17, verse 11, God tells us, for the life of the flesh is in the blood. So think about that. If blood can't function without water, and here it says that blood is essential for the life of the flesh, you can see how water, even from a biblical perspective, is crucial for our very existence. Okay? So it's more than just having an ocean of water, as the poem mentioned, but we are predominantly made up of water. About 2/3 of the water our body requires comes from ingested liquid, and about 1/3 comes from our food. Okay, so let me repeat that. 2/3 of the water that we need for our body comes from ingested liquid, like drinking water. About 1/3 comes from our food, and a small amount of liquid is actually synthesized during food metabolism. So this is one thing that a lot of people don't realize, is that oftentimes when you eat food, your body can actually metabolize what you're eating and synthesize actual water that your body needs. Fruits and vegetables generally have higher water content than do other food groups. This is why it's important that you not only eat fruits and vegetables for the minerals and vitamins you need, but also it helps supply the kinds of fluids and the liquids that your body needs. Now, ideally, the body maintains a balance between the amount of water lost each day and the amount of water taken in to replace what was lost. So the average human excretes a total of some 2,300 milliliters of water daily. Okay, so that's 2.3 liters about. During low activity at normal temperature, and when you're excreting like 2.3 during that low activity, imagine what it would be like if you're going through heavy exercise. Scientists estimate anywhere between 6 and 6.5 liters, okay, in heavy exercise. That is a lot of water. Well, the point is this: regardless of the numbers, just by the mere act of living, much less working and doing whatever it is we do, we are expending water. When you breathe, you need water. Okay, when you move, you need water. Okay, the more active you are, the more water you need, and that water needs to be replaced, which is why we need to make sure that we're drinking enough water. So, water. You might say, well, what about the liquids in coffee and tea, or Dr. Pepper, or Diet Coke, or Mountain Dew, or Red Bull, or V8? Okay, those don't count. Okay, we're talking about water. What happens if we don't drink enough water? Well, our bodies will attempt to avoid dehydration by decreasing your sweat and your urine output. And if this attempt fails, we get dehydrated, which can be a very dangerous physical condition. You'll start to feel it more sluggish. You'll feel more lethargic. You'll start to get more headaches. Maybe your eyes might get more blurry because your body's trying to pull the water to sustain body function. And dehydration causes all sorts of impairment of the body's cooling mechanism. So you might find yourself having difficulty in regulating your body temperature. All right, and one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that without water, you can actually have digestion problems. In other words, you might go through constipation or other things. I've even heard of cases from some of my family who are all physicians. I come from a medical family. They tell me that a lack of fluids and water can actually thicken the blood, and blood flow actually becomes more impaired. And by this happening, it increases the risk of intravascular clotting, which is an issue in my family. So typically what happens is when you have that higher risk of intravascular clotting, it causes things such as stroke and heart attack, which is what my grandfather passed away from. So dehydration may cause a person to experience all kinds of things as serious as death, but it starts off with dizziness and even headaches. So if you start to experience that, you probably need to start drinking tons of fluid. My family was very poor, and my grandparents were farmers, and they were outside a lot, and they didn't have access to very clean water, and a lot of water back in the day in the 1920s and 30s when they were farming in the Philippines and Hawaii. So as I mentioned, my grandfather passed away from a stroke. Now, during prolonged, arduous exercise, like today, when we try to get that exercise of walking our steps or walking a Stairmaster, okay, you can actually go through serious dehydration. And so you need to pay special care and attention to the kind of fluid intake that you're doing when you're going through those kinds of exercises. If you drink an inadequate amount of water, it will definitely increase the risk of developing even kidney and gallstones, because your body is trying to use the water to help metabolize the exercise. And so this is something that a lot of people don't realize. If you experience gallstones and kidney stones, you need to drink a lot more water, and you need to watch the kind of fluid intake, especially when you're doing work outside, or when you're lifting things, or even just bring in a bag of groceries from your car. And if you don't shop that often and you do it, say, once a week, well, that's exercise your body's not accustomed to. So you need to watch your intake there. So water is crucial in everything. And I mentioned to you about the digestive process. Um, I think we all know how horrible that is, right? When your digestion process doesn't feel right, even if you have, like, for example, you can't control going to the restroom or you're constipated. Okay, so what happens? Typically, we'll go take Pepto-Bismol or we'll take X-Lax. Okay, how about drink some water first? Okay, exercise and fiber definitely takes a role in your digestion, and a lot of people don't realize that water, exercise, and eating enough fiber helps regulate your digestive process. But a lot of people, they'll do exercise and fiber, but they'll forget the water. And boy, can you imagine exercising and eating a ton of fiber and then forgetting the water? You're going to be in serious trouble. Okay. Um, in 1995, the Journal of the American Medical Association had an interesting study, and it called attention to the hazards from inadequate fluid intake. So, in my research, when I was putting this together, in the article, it said that older Americans were the ones that actually faced this the most. So, they did a study across the board, and they estimated that adequate hydration of older people could save thousands of days of hospitalization and millions of dollars each year. So what they were concluding was that a lot, as we get older, we drink less water. And so as they were analyzing a lot of the medical issues that older people were experiencing, it was attributable to dehydration and a lack of fluid intake. And this observation had a serious implication for all age groups. And so when the American Medical Association released their study in 1995 in that journal, they concluded that in many cases, medical problems would be avoided if people simply drank more water. Isn't that crazy? And then in 2005, as I was researching this, the Dietary Guidelines for Americans came out with a recommendation, and that was that they said to help stay hydrated during prolonged physical activity or in hot water, they recommend that we drink fluids not only before but also during the activity, as well as several glasses of water after the physical activity is completed, because they're saying that the way our body utilizes the water, you drink the water, it's metabolizing, and even during that exercise, you're going through a dehydration, so you're trying to replenish. And then at the end, when your body's cooling down, you need to drink slowly water to help replenish and regulate your metabolism as well as your body temperature. Now, begin drinking water in the morning is what they said. So because in the morning, the body is relatively dehydrated because you're perspiring during sleep. And I don't know how many of you wake up in the morning and your bed sheets are completely soaked. Well, that water came from somewhere. That means that you were definitely perspiring your body through the night and you're dehydrated. So they say you need to drink water first thing in the morning. Then you need to continue to drink water at regular intervals throughout the day. And that will help you keep good regulation. Now, I guess the question is, and I know when I've done this lecture before, my brother gives this lecture, Dr. Troy Anderson, and the question that is often asked is how much? How much water should we drink each day? Well, the answer really is there's no clear-cut answer, okay? It really depends on you and your various circumstances. So you can't really like put a nutshell and say, okay, drink 8 glasses and you're good to go, okay? Because someone working hard outside for hours in the hot sun is going to expend more water and therefore need more water than someone sitting down in an office sitting behind a desk. And then take that person sitting behind the desk and throw into that a weekend activity like going out and going hiking. Well, your daily input of water is going to change depending on your activity. So each one is going to need different optimum amounts to replenish what is lost. And it's now said that an adequate intake for men is roughly about 3 liters. That's about 13 cups of water a day. That's for men. Okay, that's just on average. Okay. For women, they say it's about 2.2 liters or about 9 cups a day. So this is a recommendation on optimum amounts. And again, this changes on an individual to individual basis and also changes based on your level of activity. Now, whatever amount you drink, be sure to drink water that is pure and water that is clean. Because as you know, and I don't have to tell you this, contaminated water can be even more dangerous to you than drinking no water. Hundreds of millions of people around the world do not even have access to fresh and clean water. One of the things that many people don't know about me is my undergraduate degree is in biology and microbiology. My first work out of college was working as a chemist and a microbiologist for Los Angeles County. And I grew to be an expert in water irrigation systems and fresh and clean water. So that was one of my first jobs when I got deployed out was water. Um, Now, when I was in Cambodia, I saw people without water. Even in Russia, people were drinking vodka, not water, okay? Or drinking just whatever they can get a hand on, like juices, okay? And here you see a picture in Africa. Many of those around the African nation don't have access to clean water. And most of us, it's not true for us here in America because all we have to do is just go to your faucet, you turn on the knob, and clean water comes flowing out of your faucet, okay, in like every house in America, okay? But millions around the world don't have clean water. Now, here in Arizona, you probably still need to be careful because even when I turn on the spigot in my home, it's filled with tons of calcium and phosphorus, so I have to run it through a filter, right? So you just need to be very careful. I found this interesting statement by UNICEF. And according to UNICEF, here's what they say. Across the globe, every day, 1,400 children die, okay? Die. And they're dying from diseases directly linked to unsafe water, or at least a lack of basic sanitation facilities. Now, if you just think about that, if you saw one child die, that would hurt you and it would be like heart-wrenching to witness that. Throw into that 1,400 children, and then you ask the question, what could cause such a horrible epidemic? And when you find out that it was directly to the fact that they didn't have access to water, it should make you mad. Okay, it should make us all just shake our heads and say, how can this be so in 2020, where 1,400 children died from a disease that was directly linked to unsafe water, or linked to a lack of basic sanitation facilities? Okay, and this is what the UNICEF shows every single day. If you don't believe me, just go on UNICEFUSA.org and look at it for yourself. That's the latest statistic. If that many people die every day, children, okay, can you imagine how many more are suffering the ill effects of not having what most of us take for granted? I mean, we don't even worry about fresh water, and these people can't even find it. Look at this. Notice the bottled water in supermarkets. So, this is just a simple picture. One brand after another, big bottles, little bottles, blue bottles, green bottles, brown bottles, long and slender bottles, short and squat bottles, glass bottles, plastic bottles, right? 6-packs, 20-packs, bottles from France, from the Italians, spring water up in, Avion, springs, bottled water from every creek and deep spring in America, Alaska. Okay, water is everywhere, and they bottle it and they sell it. Look at that. There's even Russian water, Evian water. Okay, so Greek water. Okay, yet 2 billion people around the world drink out of the same waters that others defecate in. So here we are. We have the access to such clean water that we can choose every kind of water that we want, and we can buy it or bottle it or filter it ourselves. And yet, right now, at this very moment, as you look at this picture, 2 billion people around the world are drinking out of the same waters that they defecate and wash their clothes in. That's just crazy. Now, another important use of water is cleansing then. So we know in the Bible that water is a symbol of spiritual cleansing, right? So here, look at it in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 25 and 26. It says, husbands, love your wives. Okay, let me just rephrase this. Husbands, love your wives. Okay, so I said it wrong. I said, husband, love your wives. Okay, that's not what it says. It's not advocating polygamy here. Okay, it says, husbands, in plural, love your wives, your respective individual lives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her that he might sanctify and cleanse her with the washing of water by the word. Okay, so here the Bible is using water as a metaphor for spiritual cleansing. Let's talk about that. You know that being dirty simply increases the risk of getting sick. Right now in this pandemic, people are spreading the disease because they're not washing their hands appropriately, right? So we're all being trained again how to do it. Well, an essential element to keeping your hands clean, obviously, is more than just soap. You need what? Water. Frequent hand washing may reduce the transmission, as we have been told by the CDC, of many infectious agents like the COVID-19. And just by doing that, just by keeping your hands clean, okay, and using water disinfectants, okay, will reduce that person-to-person transmission of horrible diseases like the coronavirus. And if people thoroughly wash their hands with soap and water before eating their food, okay, or washing their hands after the activities that soil their hands, did you know that a large percentage of infectious diseases would be absolutely eliminated? That's been proven. And hydrotherapy. Do you know what hydrotherapy is? Okay, so hydrotherapy is where you're using hot and cold water. You know, where you take a shower super cold, then you go hot and then you go cold again. That's what you call hydrotherapy, or when you sit in a hot bath and a cold bath. A lot of athletes do that. So what that is simply a home therapeutic application where it helps to provide muscle and bruising relief. And the way that works is that you can do it with towels, or you can do it in a bath or a shower, this alternating between cold and hot. Okay, so what that does is the cold water helps increase the production of those white blood cells, is what I'm told. And then the hot water improves the blood flow to distribute through your body. Okay, so that application of hot and cold is stimulating your body's ability to fight infections and start to heal a little bit more quickly. So what they say is, if you have a recent injury and bruising occurs, if you use a cold compress, then that's definitely more appropriate. So you receive an injury, you get a bruise, you use a cold compress. Okay, so you know about that. But caution should be exercised where the skin is diseased or cut, where blood flow has become impaired. Because what they're saying is that neurological damage that results from that problem will give you the inability to feel either the cold or the hot. So you just have to be careful about things like that, okay? Well, there are many modes of hydrotherapy, such as cold mitten friction. You know, I've heard of hot foot baths, heat compresses, ice compresses. You know all these. It's unfortunate that so few utilize these most basic, useful tools for relief. They instantly go to Tylenol or ibuprofen, or they'll run to the doctor. They didn't have ibuprofen or Tylenol back in the days of old. How did they get through it? Well, they're using these ancient methods of hydrotherapy. So if you don't know anything about hydrotherapy, it certainly is something worth looking into, and you can do a lot of research on it. Okay, but I'm not going to take a lot of time to talk about hydrotherapy, but we are talking about water and how important it is. And water could be a great healing tool. Well, there's a story of a man who injured his elbow during a badminton game, and he would not listen to advice at all. Okay, and so he hurt his elbow, and they told him compress the injury of his elbow with ice to reduce that internal bleeding. This is what you do normally, right? Well, the next day he didn't do it. The next day, the bruised area around his elbow was completely swollen, so much that he went to go see the doctor right away. Okay, you know what the doctor told him to do? The doctor told him to go home and take an ice compress at home, okay, and stick it on his elbow. Guess how much the doctor charged him? $100. Okay, how about this? How about if you injure yourself, how about using an ice compress and save the $100? Okay. Oh, well, look at this statement here, written over 100 years ago. The external application of water is one of the easiest and most satisfactory ways of regulating the circulation of the blood. So scientists have already proven this, but this was written over 100 years ago by Ellen White. She goes on and says, but many have never learned by experience the beneficial effects of the proper use of water. Okay, we're made of water, so water is a great healer. All should become intelligent in its use in simple home treatments. Okay, and that came from her book called The Ministry of Healing, and that was a quote from page 137. So you can find her books anywhere. She's online, but she has a wonderful catalog of books that she wrote on healing and using homeopathic methods, just like hydrotherapy, to help you deal with issues that we deal with even today. So, water is a precious and indispensable resource, and it can be for so many things, right? And as we saw, the vast majority of the Earth's water is simply just not drinkable. And in some parts of the world, water shortages cause starvation and even death. Okay, because, and did you know that in some places there's not even enough water to grow their crops? Okay, so we see that it's important that we not waste water. It's important to avoid wasting it. When possible, install toilets and shower heads in your home that use less water. Try to save it. When you're brushing your teeth, turn the water tap only to wet and rinse your toothbrush, then turn it off. And while you're brushing your teeth, don't let it run. Okay? I have a toilet in my house. Okay, I've lived in my house now for quite some years. I have this toilet that continues to just run. I have to keep telling my family, keep jiggling the handle, okay? I've had to repair that toilet 3 times and it still won't stop. So what do? Well, I have to turn off the water on that thing or put signs up that say jiggle the handle, right? If you have a leaky faucet, repair it. All right, if you have these continuous small drips in your irrigation outside, go out there and just spend the 60 cents and replace the head on your irrigation system so water's not popping up and going on your driveway or the sidewalk, okay? So watch for appropriate ways to conserve water in your day-to-day routine, because as you know, 0.37% of the Earth's water is the only water that we can drink and use. The rest of it is salt water, and it's not usable. Let's all do what we can to avoid polluting water. What do you think? Water can be polluted by many things like human excrement, industrial waste, chemicals from plants or what we throw down the toilet, okay, or in our sinks. Animals raised in large agricultural feedlot operations consume huge amounts of water, and their excrement has the potential to pollute groundwater and nearby rivers and streams. So a lot has gone into cleaning and purifying and filtering animal waste in these large agricultural feedlots. And even today, we still have these issues where E. coli is still found in spinach and other kinds of things because they just can't be washed fast enough, okay? So, these issues are very important, and it is definitely up to us to do whatever we can. It is a biblical mandate because we need to take care of what God has given us. This is our home right now until Jesus comes, right? Eating a vegetarian diet, let's talk about that, has been shown, believe it or not, to help conserve water. And you might say, how is that so? I never heard that before. Well, think about it. Foods consumed in a plant-based diet require much less water to produce, okay? So if the entire world were vegetarians, a great deal of the water shortage problem would be solved. Now, I have to admit that I eat only the clean foods, and my culture, we eat fish and we eat chicken, and occasionally there's beef, the clean meats and all that. But basically, the science is saying that if everyone just ate vegetables, it requires less water to grow the vegetable than it does for the animals that need to drink the water to produce its meat. So that's basically what they're trying to say. I think this is just another way of saying conserve water, watch what you eat, have a balanced diet, and just know that there is a water shortage on the planet. Now, if you don't believe me, go to California and come to Arizona, where there's a lot of drought scenarios. We have huge fires right now going on because of the drought, if you're not aware of that. Now, I can just go on and on about water, but I'm going to close it out here. It is in many ways truly a miracle liquid, isn't it? I mean, think about it. H2O is basically two hydrogens and an oxygen molecule, and yet it can survive in three different states: vapor, a solid in ice, okay, or a liquid. But even more than the miracle of the fact that water can survive in three different states, it actually nourishes us, it sustains us, it can heal us, and it can cleanse us. I mean, think about what else on the planet can do all those things: nourish, sustain, heal, and cleanse, and grow. You know, I mean, it's a miracle. It's a miracle liquid, and God created it right at the beginning. It was one of his first creations, which again is why we find it all through the Bible. There's one place in particular where we can see just how crucial the whole idea of water is. Did you know 2,000 years ago, Jesus met a woman in Samaria who had come to a well to draw water? And he asked her for a drink. And in the ensuing conversation, he said that he could give her water that would take away her thirst forever. And here's what he said: "Whosoever drinks of this water from the well will thirst again." That's what Jesus told her. "But whoever drinks of the water that I shall give him will never thirst." Okay? What do you think he's talking about there? The water that I shall give him will become in him a fountain of water springing up into everlasting life. Okay, now, there's so much that we can take away just from here, okay? As we have seen, water is essential for life, for human life here on the earth. And life is, of course, a wonderful gift from God. It's a precious gift, and we all covet it, right? But we all know sooner or later, if Jesus doesn't return before then, we are all going to what? Die. Water, physical water, H2O, no matter how wonderful, no matter how much of a miracle it is to heal us, no matter how essential it is for our body, okay, it won't keep us alive forever. And this is why Jesus says, if you want eternal life, you need to have something more, okay? And that is that you need to have health, and that health is related to your spirit. So you can look stuff up like the health message of the Seventh-day Adventist, but I do want to just close it out by saying this, and that is that Jesus can provide the water of life that can give you everlasting life. I'm going to tell you a little story here. I have a funny little picture. A jogger was running down the street one day, and someone was driving by in a car, and he rolled down the window and yelled, "You're going to die anyways," right? Because this guy was jogging for health, right? And he said, "You're going to die anyways," okay? He was rude, okay? But essentially, he was right. I mean, this guy, he was trying to exercise and minding his own business. Some guy in a car just stopped and says, "You're going to die anyways. What's the point?" Okay, wonderful health message, right, is this. It can't solve our race's greatest enemy, which is death, but we know that we do have a solution. We need water, we need food, we need exercise, we need sunlight, we need good nutrition, but ultimately what we need is everlasting life that only Jesus can provide. Jesus is the fountain of water springing up into everlasting life. And even though we can do all that we can, I can talk all for the whole year on the spiritual aspects of being healthy, eating right, having water, fresh water, having a balanced, holistic life. At the end of the day, none of that's going to matter if we don't have Jesus. Okay? Jesus came to accomplish everything for the human race. And it's in Jesus that we truly have a healthy, vibrant life that will be eternal. Jesus used the image of water, a fountain of water springing up into everlasting life. Water, physical water, H2O, is essential for life, for the temporal and fleeting physical existence that we have here. We can't have that existence without it. But for eternal life, H2O is useless. If works don't save us, drinking water won't either, right? So what do we need? We need Jesus, and we need him for redemption and salvation because he worked that out for us. I'm going to close with this in Revelation chapter 22, verse 17, with this text here. It says, "And the Spirit and the bride say, Come. And let him who hears say, Come. And let him who thirsts Come. Whoever desires, let him take the water of life freely. Friends, this is a Bible promise found in the last book of the Bible, the book of Revelation, in the very last chapter. And this is a message from God to you and I. And he says, if you want to live a prosperous life, if you want eternal life, God says to you, come and drink of the water that shall never end, that will lead to everlasting life. Come and take that water freely. The water of life, my friend, is Jesus. Water, water everywhere. And now, thanks to the grace of God, plenty for all of us to drink. Amen. All right, I want to thank everyone again for joining me today. I want to invite you back at 11 o'clock. I'm going to be talking about A New Day is Dawning. That's my 11 o'clock series. But again, I want to just thank everyone who follow me at these 9:30 sessions. I know for some of you it's difficult because you can't go to your churches because of the COVID-19. Some of you, you're not too certain about whether it's safe or not, because some states are open. But I am going to continue broadcasting at this time, so that way you have something that you can worship and you can study. And I like to provoke your mind a little bit and maybe talk about things that you don't typically hear. And you can always just go back and you can always study. If you have any questions, go ahead and just message me or type something in the comment bar below, and I'll get answers for you. I have quite a few that have been doing that now. So until I see you next week, remember I have a broadcast in just several minutes here at 11 o'clock. Or within an hour or so, and then Wednesday nights at 6:30, Friday at 7:30 if you're interested in Daniel prophecies, and then Saturday at 3 o'clock we are really looking at the prophecies found in the book of Revelation, which is really relevant to what's happening now. So until then, God bless everyone. Bye.